The summer offensive is over. Russia threw everything it had at Ukraine, and yet, after months of fighting, it came away with almost nothing. But here's what the mainstream headlines won't tell you. This failure isn't just about territory. It's about the limits of brute force, the power of innovation, and the cracks forming inside Vladimir Putin's entire war machine. So let's break this down. From the very beginning of 2024, Russia made it clear that its priority was a major push during the summer months. Western analysts warned that Ukraine was exhausted, short on manpower, and badly in need of ammunition. Moscow saw an opportunity. The idea was simple: grind down Ukrainian defenses, overwhelm them with numbers, and take key cities before winter set in. That's the narrative you heard in the media. Endless talk of Russia's inevitable momentum, speculation that Ukraine's allies would pull back, and warnings that Kyiv might soon face collapse. But reality on the ground tells a very different story. Yes, Russia made advances, but they were small, scattered, and strategically meaningless. One by one, Russian assaults fell flat. And as the weeks dragged on, a bigger picture emerged. This was not a confident superpower dictating the battlefield. It was a desperate empire throwing wave after wave of poorly trained men into the meat grinder. Let's take Pokrovsk as an example. Throughout the summer, the city became one of the focal points of Russia's offensive. Russian troops managed to punch through Ukrainian lines there, on paper, a breakthrough. But look closer. They did it with tiny squads of infantry, sometimes just a few dozen soldiers backed by light vehicles. Why so few? Because every time Russia tried to move tanks or armored columns, Ukrainian drones wiped them out in minutes. And that's the real story here. Ukraine has fundamentally changed the way this war is fought. Cheap, mass-produced drones, many of them flown in first-person view, have become the great equalizer. Suddenly, billion-dollar tanks and armored personnel carriers are nothing more than moving targets. Russia tried to adapt by sending smaller units, hoping they'd be harder to detect. It worked to a point. But those units could only punch small holes in the line, holes that Ukraine quickly closed before they became serious breaches. Think about what that means. Russia is stuck. Its doctrine has always been about mass, rolling across borders with overwhelming firepower, crushing defenders under sheer weight of armor and artillery. But when the armor disappears, so does the strategy. Sure, Moscow can take small villages, it can plant its flag in ruins and call it victory, but to take real cities, fortified, defended urban centers, it needs heavy equipment and concentrated power, and drones have stripped that away. Which brings us back to Pokrovsk. Russia broke through, yes, but without armor to expand that breach, the gains evaporated almost overnight. Ukraine counterattacked, sealed the line, and eliminated the invading troops. The pattern repeated itself again and again over the summer, small gains followed by brutal losses. And here's the question no one in Moscow seems to want to answer. How long can this continue? Because the truth is, Russia didn't solve this problem all summer long. It kept trying the same tactics, hoping numbers alone would make the difference. But those numbers are finite. The longer the war drags on, the more Moscow's manpower shortage becomes glaring. Let's be clear, Russia still has people to throw into the fight, but what it doesn't have is a sustainable pipeline of trained, motivated soldiers. Instead, it relies on conscripts, prisoners, and men pulled off the streets with little preparation. These are not professional troops, they're cannon fodder, and that matters, because wars aren't won by raw numbers alone, they're won by strategy, technology, and morale. Ukraine, despite its own struggles with manpower, has compensated with creativity. It has built a drone army from scratch, found ways to stretch limited resources, and leveraged Western support to stay in the fight. Russia, on the other hand, has leaned on the same Soviet-era mindset, sacrifice lives in exchange for ground. But here's what they don't tell you. That strategy doesn't work anymore, not in the age of drones, not when every column can be watched, tracked, and destroyed in real time. And it's not just about drones. The failures of Russia's summer offensive expose deeper weaknesses. Logistics remain a nightmare. Command structures are plagued with corruption and incompetence. Local commanders are often forced to improvise because orders from above are unrealistic or disconnected from reality. In many ways, Russia is fighting not just Ukraine, but also its own decaying military system. The result? A so-called summer offensive that ends with little to show. No major cities captured, no decisive breakthroughs, just minor settlements and staggering losses. Now think about the timing. We're heading into autumn, and soon, the brutal Ukrainian winter will lock both sides in place. That means Putin just wasted his best window of opportunity. By the time the snow melts, Ukraine could be rearmed with fresh Western aid packages and more advanced drone technology. If Russia couldn't deliver a victory now, how will it do so when conditions grow even harder? And that's the bigger picture here. This isn't just a failed offensive. It's a sign that the Kremlin may have already peaked. Let's step back for a moment and put this into historical perspective. Throughout history, empires that relied on mass armies have often been brought down by innovation. Think about World War I, when machine guns and trench warfare shattered old doctrines of cavalry charges, or World War II, when tanks and aircraft carriers replaced the battleships and bayonet charges of the past. The same pattern is unfolding today, only this time, it's drones rewriting the rules. Russia, stuck in the past, hasn't adapted fast enough. Ukraine, under existential pressure, had no choice but to innovate, and it has. The result is a battlefield where the supposed giant looks increasingly clumsy, while the smaller defender keeps finding ways to survive. And make no mistake, survival for Ukraine is victory. Every month Kyiv holds out is another month that Russia fails to impose its will. Every failed offensive undermines Putin's aura of inevitability, both at home and abroad. This matters not just for Ukraine but for the entire world. Because behind the headlines, this war is a test of whether brute force and imperial aggression can still dictate international politics in the 21st century. If Russia succeeds, it sends a message. Might makes right. If Russia fails, it shows that even smaller nations armed with innovation and resilience can resist domination. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Much of the Western media avoids framing it this way. Instead, coverage often slips into fatalism, painting Ukraine as doomed, exaggerating Russia's strength, and ignoring the cracks beneath the surface. That's not journalism, that's propaganda dressed up as analysis. The reality is more complicated, more nuanced, and frankly more hopeful. Ukraine has exposed the vulnerabilities of a so-called superpower. It has forced the world to rethink how wars are fought, and in doing so, it has created a model for resistance that others will study for decades. So, as we close out this chapter of the war, what can we conclude? The summer offensive was supposed to be Putin's moment of triumph. Instead, it became a showcase of failure, small gains erased by quick counterattacks, enormous casualties for minimal results, and a looming winter that will freeze the front lines in place. Ukraine, though bloodied and battered, has held. More than that, it has adapted, turned weakness into strength, and denied Russia the victories it so desperately needed. The question now is simple. What comes next? Will Russia double down, pouring more lives into the furnace? Will Ukraine's allies step up support as the war drags into another year? Or will the failures of this summer force a new round of negotiations? Negotiations shaped not by Russian victories but by Russian defeats? That's where things stand today. The offensive is over. The gains are minimal. And the myth of Russia's unstoppable power has taken yet another hit. So let me leave you with this. Wars are not just fought on battlefields. They're fought in narratives, in perceptions, in the stories nations tell themselves and the world. Right now, Putin's story is falling apart. And Ukraine, against all odds, is writing a new one. What do you think? Is Russia's failure this summer the turning point of the war, or just another chapter in a conflict with no end in sight? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget, subscribe to The Military Show, follow along for more in-depth analysis, and stay tuned as we continue uncovering the truths the mainstream won't tell you. Because this war isn't just about Ukraine, it's about the future of global power, and the fight has only just begun.